NEAT, not in education, employment, or training. It's a clinical sounding acronym. However, it describes millions of youths around the world who've silently checked out of society. Not because they're lazy, but because somewhere along the way, something broke. Maybe it was burnout after years of pressure, maybe it was social anxiety or depression, maybe they did everything right only to be met with soaring housing prices, rising costs of living, and a job market that shut the door in their face. Others feel crushed by societal expectations that if you don't have it all figured out by 25, you're already behind. So they stop and then time just slips away. But feeling stuck doesn't always feel this dramatic. Sometimes it's just waking up tired for the third month in a row. Working in a job you don't particularly care about, scrolling social media and comparing yourself to others, wondering if everyone else has their life figured out except you. You tell yourself, it's just a phase, you'll figure it out soon. But weeks turn into months and eventually you stop thinking about it altogether. You're not living, you're just waiting. And no anime captures this sense of despair to reclaim one's life quite like Kaiji. Because at the center of this story, it isn't a five-headed genius. It's Kaiji, a man who's not necessarily brave or even likable at first. He's broke, aimless, the kind of guy who spends his days drinking cheap beers, gambling away what little he has left, and vandalizes nice cars out of envy. And you get the sense that Kaiji isn't doing this because he's reckless, but his actions stem from shame, that everyone else is ahead and he's already lost. Shame doesn't just paralyze Kaiji, it convinces him there's no point in trying, and that belief is what keeps him stuck. Set during Japan's economic collapse in the late 90s, a time where an entire generation of people, fresh out of college, felt abandoned by the system. Kaiji represents the average person who's already given up, someone who's been cast out by society, and that's exactly what makes him so painfully relatable. The story kicks off with a loan shark named Endo, approaching Kaiji demanding payment for a loan that he had co-signed years ago for a former co-worker, leaving Kaiji buried in his debt of 3.85 million yen. Kaiji, of course, doesn't have that kind of money, but Endo offers him a way out, a one-night-only opportunity to erase his debt, participating in a high-stake gambling event on board a ship called the Espoir. The proposition is simple: win the games and his debt is erased. In recent years, we've seen a wave of new death game shows. Alice in Borderland, Squid Game, and now Netflix's live-action abomination of Kakegurui. Whilst these shows still have their own charm, they lean heavily into the spectacle with flashy visuals, stylish costumes, and some edgy gore. They're fun and bingeable, designed to be trendy. However, then disappear from the back of your brain after a week. Kaiji, on the other hand, is different. The games may seem simple on the surface, a new version of rock, paper, scissors, balancing on a steel beam, mahjong, but the emotion lingers. The gambles Kaiji finds himself in leaves you tense, anxious, spiraling right alongside with him, which is what makes Kaiji more than just your regular gambling anime. The games become a psychological breakdown of how society keeps people stuck, how one mistake can spiral into something worse, and how the system preys on people who hesitate, or worse, do nothing at all. When we onboard the Espoir, Kaiji and the debtors are introduced to a twisted version of rock, paper, scissors. And it's within the very first game of Kaiji is where you start to see how it separates itself from every other death game series. Restricted rock, paper, scissors begins with each player receiving 12 cards, 4 rock, 4 paper, 4 scissors. Each contestant also starts with 3 stars, which act as both collateral and your lifeline to bet with. Every time you play a match, you lose a card. Win and steal a star from your opponent, but lose all your stars or fail to use all your cards before the time runs out, you're eliminated. To survive the night, you have to meet 2 conditions. Use all 12 of your cards and finish the game with at least 3 stars. But what seems like a harmless game quickly becomes a simulation of real-world economic pressure. A giant scoreboard tracks how many rocks, papers, and scissors remain in play. Just like a public stock market that everyone's watching, analyzing, and reacting in real time. And all of it takes place in a strict 4-hour time limit. So people begin to panic as the game goes on, and you can visually see the despair that people go through. Because when time pressure and scarcity is added into the mix, the real game isn't rock, paper, scissors anymore. It's human nature. And it's through the first arc that we watch Kaiji make mistake after mistake, slowly digging himself deeper in despair. He trusts the wrong people, hesitates at the worst moments, and just like when it feels like he's beyond saving, we get these tiny glimmers of hope. Moments where Kaiji starts to think critically and devises strategies that pay off. He's able to outsmart someone, even for just a round. And because we've seen how far Kaiji has fallen, even the smallest wins feel incredible. We don't cheer because he's dominating, we cheer because he's surviving. He's just a guy trying not to drown. around. And even when he finds a way to stay afloat, it doesn't last, because Kaiji's growth isn't linear. He relapses, he gambles and gets fooled again, because Kaiji isn't a redemption fantasy, but a reflection of reality. In most anime, character development is treated like a switch, a powerful flashback, a sudden epiphany. The character suddenly overcomes their flaws and never looks back. But that's not how real life works. We fall back into old habits even when we know better. Sometimes we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Change is messy. And that's how Kaiji is able to set itself apart, because when you look at a lot of modern death game shows like Squid Game, the tension doesn't come from the games themselves, because in most of its games, death is instant. There's no middle ground or slow spiral. The immediacy might shock the audience, but it leaves very little room for suspense or strategy. It's all flash and very little depth. They're stripped down versions of childhood challenges where survival often comes down to luck, not logic. Red light, green light, just don't move. The Dalgona candy, hope you didn't pick the umbrella. The glass bridge, pray you're last in line. It's exciting on a surface level, but there's no mental game, no way to outplay the system. You either guess right or you're dead. And because the games are so straightforward, the tension doesn't really come from the games themselves, it comes from how violently the contestants die. Let's also be honest, while Gi-hun has a similar upbringing to Kaiji, he's the protagonist. He has plot armor. We know he's going to survive red light, green light, even if he trips. We know he'll make it past the Dalgona, even if he picked the umbrella. So the outcome is never really in question. And without that uncertainty, a lot of that suspense evaporates. You're not asking, what would I do if I was in the Squid Games? You're just waiting to see what happens to him. It's brutal, sure, but it's performative. It's not something you feel, it's just something you watch. And visually, the entertainment first approach extends to the show's entire art direction. Squid Game is designed to be vibrant. The bright red soldiers, the bubblegum colored staircases, the giant playgrounds, everything pops with color and is attentive. Even season 2's cast featured 3 K-pop idols. And look, I don't mind that. I like conventionally attractive designs. I like that Stellar Blade is coming to PC. There's nothing wrong with entertainment looking good. But Kaiji leans into ugliness. Sharp faces, pointy noses, distorted expressions, because its world is ugly. When I'm thinking of someone who's hit rock bottom, drowning in debt, unemployed, stuck in a dead-end life, I'm not picturing people with skincare routines and perfect hairstyles. I'm thinking of people who've given up, people who look tired, and that's exactly what Kaiji captures. While the characters aren't exactly marketable, these are the type of people who get ignored on the streets, and that makes the story feel real. It makes the characters within Kaiji relatable, because when someone like that wins, even just once, it means something. You don't cheer because they're cool, you cheer because they finally caught a break in a world that was designed to see them fail. But Kaiji doesn't just feel real because of how its characters look. It feels real because of what it says about people, about how we live, and more painfully, about how we don't. One of the most devastating lines in the entire series doesn't even come from Kaiji himself. It comes from Tonegawa, a villain who works with a very system designed to break people like Kaiji.
病気だな。病気？どんな事態に至ろうと、とことん真剣になれないという病だ。通常、生涯奴らはその空想から目覚めない。つまらない毎日を送り、日々を無駄に塗りつぶし、いくつになろうと言い続けるのだ。自分の人生の本番はまだ先なんだと。本当の俺を使ってないから、今はこの程度なのだと。そう言い続け。言い続け。おいて。死ぬ。その間際、ようやく気づく。今まで生きてきた全てが丸ごと本物だったことを。
And he's not wrong. Most people don't live. They just wait for the real life that never comes. That speech hit me like a truck, because that was me. After graduating from university, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just followed the crowd. All of my friends were applying for the same kind of roles, safe, stable, corporate jobs. Not because they wanted to, but because they didn't know what else to do either. I couldn't think for myself, and I was just finding a way to fit in. Paper, it looked like I had everything together. But all of the days started to blur together, and instead of confronting what I actually needed to change in my life, I just distracted myself. Whether it was that shiny new video game or that anime I hadn't binged yet, I was comfortable but miserable. So just like a lot of other people who go through a quarter life crisis, I turned to one of those hobbies. Mine was running, but you know what they are. Run clubs, bouldering, jiu-jitsu, golf. Hell, I even started taking care of a plant. And yeah, it felt good. Running marathons gave me a sense of discipline. It felt productive. I'd get that high after a long run and tell myself I was was changing, but deep down, I realized I was just running away from the truth. I still had no idea what I actually wanted from life. Because how many times have we said, this year, I'm gonna lock in. I just need a little more time. I'll start once I fix X, Y, or Z. But months go by and we're still doom scrolling, waiting for something to happen. That's what Kaiji gets. He doesn't preach some motivational lesson, telling you to read all the self-help books, watch some David Goggins, take ice baths, but still do nothing. It shows how easy it is to drift to say someday, realizing someday never came. Not because we didn't want to change, but because starting felt impossible. And that's the brilliance of Kaiji. It's not just about survival, it's about what it takes to earn that second chance at life. Through the intricacies of each game, we see the psychological hurdles and the internal demons Kaiji has to confront. When he's walking across the steel beam, it's fear. The fear of failure, of taking that next step, the fear of being watched and judged by others. In the Underworld arc, it's discipline. The brutal, soul-crushing grind of routine. The patience to save, plan, to resist your vices in a place that's designed to break your will. These aren't just games, they're character trials. They strip Kaiji down and force him to rebuild himself one painful moment at a time. Even the author, Nobuyuki Fukumoto, was living a similar story. He wasn't some prodigy. After graduating, Fukumoto found himself in a monotonous construction job. Feeling the weight of an unfulfilling routine, he made the bold decision to pursue manga. As an assistant to a manga artist, his drawing skills were so underwhelming he was relegated to cooking duties. Yet he persisted. He took on part-time jobs to support himself while honing his craft. No one cared, but he kept going, and eventually he created Kaiji, a story about people who screw up, who hesitate, who spiral, and yet still fight to claw their way back. And after everything, there's a small detail from the very beginning of the show. A cheap motivational poster taped to the wall of Kaiji's rundown apartment saying, "The future is in our hands." At the start, it feels like a joke, because you know Kaiji clearly doesn't believe it when you see how messy his room is, but as the show progresses, you get it. It's not a motivational quote, it's just a reminder that no one's going to help you. And Kaiji, he doesn't win because he's the smartest or strongest. He wins because even when he breaks, he still gets back up, and sometimes that's enough. If you enjoyed this video and Kaiji resonated with you, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.